Good morning and welcome to the Women Expert Academy 2022. We are so excited to be here today on our second model of our training and really very much looking forward to the conversation today. Before we start, I do want to thank for first start with UPS and in a collaborative initiative with US Commercial Services. We're very proud to be hosting this academy and be able to bring these topics of conversations. And I want to thank all our partners that have helped us promote the event and be able to reach out to all of you that are watching us live right now or in the recording. I want to thank the City of Dallas, the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, the Minority Business Office, the Department of Agriculture of Texas, the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, the Minority Business Development Agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce in Arizona, Dallas, Houston, Louisiana, San Antonio, and the Export Center, NAVO, the National Association of Women and Business Owners, the New Mexico Small Business Development Center Network, OWIT, the Organization of Women in International Trade, WeBank, the Women Business Enterprise Network Council, and the Women Business Enterprise Council South. We have a lot of partners, and I think this is fabulous because that really shows the community and the work that we're doing together as women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs as a whole. And so today I'm excited because we're going to have a great conversation. We have two wonderful speakers that I can't wait for you to hear from them and learn about what we're doing. We're also going to be continuing to talk about, from a UPS perspective, our Women Exporter Program, very important. We believe we have three objectives that we're looking forward to continue to implement here in the United States with you and globally, which is capacity building, do training, be able to have the information that can empower you to be successful and be competitive as an entrepreneur. Also, not only the training is important, the access to market, that's where the partnerships help. All the tools that you learned last week from the Small Business Administration, from Exim Bank, from US Commercial Services, how are you able to connect to other markets? And also we continue to work on regulations and policies that are going to impact your business and make you more effective. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I think is fascinating. I'm a trade nerd, so I love it. It's about tariffs, Incoterms, regulations. And I see our two speakers smiling because I know they love these topics. And it is to learn about the export process, to understand what is a product classification, what are the required documents to export, what are international payment terms. All of these things can make a difference in your business and how you move forward. And so these topics are going to be covered by two amazing entrepreneurs, women leaders, business leaders that are here. And so I'm happy to introduce today Ms. Elise Erickson, who's a lifelong entrepreneur. Elise, I'm gonna read your bio because I love it. And you are known as Betty Sue Export Queen, and I know you'll talk more to us about that. And you bring expertise. You run your own business. You've been able to support other businesses, providing them advice on how to export. You are the author of the Riddle of the Exporter Training Workbook, which has been presented throughout the US, Spain, and Puerto Rico. I love your business experience. Elise, good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here. And then Kelly Wilton, who is my colleague in UPS. Between Elise, Kelly, and I, we bring over 100 years of experience. The three of us started when we were 5 years old, right? Kelly is our cross-border trade compliance manager with UPS. She has led many areas of expertise in brokerage, and she became a customs broker in the 80s. Great decade for music and movies. Kelly, you have expertise in cross-border trade. You were in the UK dealing with cross-border customs issues when the Olympics in 2012. You have the expertise in compliance, and you have been recently through the adventures of new trade agreements and implementation here in USMCA. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. These two amazing subject matter experts and individuals are going to give you the training of today. And I think, Elise, I'm going to go with the polls before I turn it over to you. So
Perfect.
let's, dear audience, I ask you to answer these questions. We're going to ask you some questions, and we need you to, we'll give you some time for you to answer. I'm going to launch the first question. And it's a question that makes sense. Let's say you have a product you're selling, and currently I'm familiar with my product classification, required export documentation, a freight forwarder, and Incoterms. You understand what we are, all of this. Do you, let us know, what do you think? Very interesting. None of the above or all of the above? I'm gonna give a little bit more time for people to respond while we get to, let me get to 70% of the participants to respond. What are you familiar with in this topic? So we're gonna stop here so we can share. Let's look at the results. Very interesting there, right? Elise and Kelly, what is the understanding of the participants? Let's go to the second question. Sorry, okay. Let me see, make certain that we have our second question. Oh, that's the question that we have in for this part. So with this, Elise, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can share your screen, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Share screen. Here we go. Okay, so can everyone see my slide?
Yep, you can see it.
So the question for the day and the question for the future of your business is, can you solve the riddle of the exporter? In case you haven't heard the riddle, it goes like this. I'm a USPPI with a product that's an EAR 99, not on the CCL, and going to somewhere not X'd on the CCC and not to an SDN. Am I okay? Do I contact the DOC or the BIS? And do I need an HTS or an ECCN to file my EEI with the AES, now the ACE? Do I ship it FCA or CIP? And just to make sure I CMA, cover my ass, do I use an LC? You tell me. So before you gasp and say you cannot solve the riddle of the exporter, in this session and the rest of our sessions, we're going to tell you why and how you can solve the riddle of the exporter. So our goal is to get everyone excited about exporting. So I appreciate the introduction. I wanted to let you know just a little bit. My name's Elise Erickson. My company is Export Connector. I would love for you all to visit me on my site, but it crashed last night at 11. So if you go there, you'll only get error messages. The training that we offer is the riddle of the exporter. But to me, what I would like for you all to know is I'm not a trainer by heart just because I train in exporting. I'm a small business person like you. My background is actually concrete manufacturing with cast stone, and the slate product is a GFRC, a glass fiber reinforced concrete. So when I talk with small businesses, I truly know what you go through. I know the ecstasy of introducing a new product that's successful, and I know the panic when you can't sleep at night because you realize once you pay your rent and your employees, there might not be enough cash for you. But it's a great adventure and it's only going to get better. So I've exported, imported the bad way, the hard way. And someone said to me, Elise, can you put together a training with an entrepreneur in mind that doesn't put people to sleep in 5 minutes? And as a typical entrepreneur, I said, sure, I can do that. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Guam and I've been doing it ever since. So I really want to thank you letting me talk to you in this module 2. The title is Incoterms, Tariffs, and More. What I'd like to do is show you the big picture process and see that these are just not random, that they fit in a specific spot. So this is where our poll was. It looks like everyone was pretty evenly divided. As we go along, I always say there are 2 numbers and 2 sentences you cannot live without in exporting, and we're going to explore that. Now, the notes, you'll get notes when in the handout later, but you might take a few general notes here. What I do is get in the big picture process, and then Kelly will get into the details. So I hope that everything flows and you see it together. Now, oftentimes exporting is taught like a whack-a-mole game. We think there's a different way to do it from the entrepreneurial view. We teach an 8-step process, start to finish. Step number 1 is getting started. Step number 2, market research, go on to market entry, then legal, compliance, transportation. Step number 7, payments and finance. And the most important step at all is cultural. So here's where we fit into this module. I'm going to show you where your product classification fits in to the process, where your tariffs and landed costs. I'm going to show you your important numbers, your Incoterms, and your payment terms. Okay, now we cannot export without an exporter. So this is my good friend, Betty Sue, export queen. She is actually from Cactus, Texas, but you can see she's from Texas because we kind of believe that the bigger the hair, the closer to God. So you see a lot of things in Texas with big hair. Now she has several products and she is exporting these products to Fiona Finn. Now Fiona Finn has a shop in the Outback, but we're getting it to Sydney, Australia. Now, as with all things Betty Sue, kind of like her big hair, there's a little Hollywood story behind here. So maybe some of her products don't make sense, but I promise you her hair cannot get any taller. Betty Sue is from Cactus, Texas, but she could be from Boring, Oregon, Santa Claus, Indiana, Ponce, Puerto Rico, or Toadsuck, Arkansas. What she represents is the absolute best of small business, the one who can figure it out and move forward. And as in all small business, we are always open for business. So here's her products, just so you know, her Texas tongue torch sauce, her sunscreen, her rattlesnake olive oil, which is a real olive oil. And pay attention to this, her newest product. This is her rhinestone studded night vision goggles. We need a little more glitter there for Betty Sue. So before I start talking, I've found that with entrepreneurs, I need to give you a few things before you go. Okay, the most important sentence you will know when exporting is export here equals import there. They're all tied together. You can't export without importing somewhere. Export here, what does it take to get my product out of the US? Import there, what does it take to get it into Australia or Japan or Brazil? Okay, so there's your first sentence that you need to know. Of your 2, export here equals import there. Now, here's the other thing. Why are there so many names for the same thing in the government? I can't answer that. I just know there's a lot and they're there. Pay attention to 2 on this, trade.gov. It's a great website, and USEAC, U.S. Export Assistance Center. Now you heard from Jessica last week and you will hear from Karen next week. They are the directors of their region, but I know there's over 160, I believe, offices. So these are export agencies. And don't get them confused with import agencies. So there always has to be an export agency on one side and an import agency on the other. Don't let a few acronyms and government agencies scare you, because you have to remember, if Betty Sue can export, you can export. Here's our second no before you go. I get this all the time. Who can export? Well, any US citizen or legal resident has the right to export. However, certain products or orders must require an export license. So how do you know if you require an export license? You will only require an export license if your item, like Betty Sue's rhinestone-studded night vision goggles, has some potential military use. This is called a dual-use item. It has commercial use, but potential military use. So if you have something, unless you're exporting scopes and ammunition, we're not too worried about an export license. But you always must remember, even if you're exporting something as simple as paper clips, it cannot go to the bad guys. So we're going to look at this again in compliance, but the questions are the 4 questions. What is my product? Where is it going? It cannot go to an embargoed country. Who is it going to? Cannot go to a bad guy. And how will it be used? Is it a simple product like the rattlesnake olive oil or a dual use item? Now here's our last thing. And again, we're going to get into this more detail. This are the infamous Incoterms. They're these funny little terms. There's 11 of them, but here's some examples. These have to do with the task, the cost, and the risk of getting the product transportation-wise from the seller to the buyer. You as the seller, what task are you going to take over? What cost are you going to pay for upfront? And as far as risk, when is the product no longer your responsibility? Now, I call these the infamous Incoterms because if you do not think before you ship, it's like what Forrest Gump said, it will come and bite you in the buttocks. So you don't have to know all these, but let me tell you, you're also going to meet your BFF, your best friend forever, your freight forwarder, and they'll help you with this. Now, last week, just very quickly, we talked about getting started. Either if you're an accidental exporter or an intentional exporter, the important information from last week is check out your clients, no scans. There's another acronym, an ICP, International Company Profile. Don't worry about the acronym. Just say, I need that check amount service, right? And so that is the most important thing. You do not move on unless you have a legitimate client. So step 1, do you have what it takes? Do you have a viable product that can be adapted to foreign markets? Management commitment, financial commitment, curiosity and openness, and develop a blue ribbon team. The last thing I do want to say about step 1, because it affects all the other parts. How are you going to export? Are you going to export directly or indirectly? If you do it directly, you're handling every step of the 8-step process. You're going to get the distributors. You're going to make sure the contracts are right. If you do it through a third-party fulfillment, they will handle some or all of the 8 steps. Now we're into our first important number on market research. And I'm kind of like Maria Luisa. I'm like I'm a trade nerd. That's all there is to it. I love all this stuff. I'm a freight nerd. Here is what's so cool. In this picture, everything in the world has a number, everything. Because if export here equals import there, the number in the US needs to match the number in Australia. This is part of a worldwide system called the Harmonized Tariff Schedule that numbers everything for export and import. So we're just going to see a little overview of how that works. Here are our cows. It's a 10-digit number. So remember, the HTS is the big worldwide system. But in the US, we like to have a lot of names for the same thing. So this is the Schedule B number. You can hear it referred to as the Harmonized Tariff System, your product classification, your HTS number, your Schedule B. It all tells in exporting and importing by number what you're exporting. Again, that is your Schedule B, a 10-digit number. Now I'm putting a 6-digit number down here because some people would ask for the 6-digit number, and you will use a 6-digit number for any research. But remember, it's a Schedule B exporting from the US, and it's a 10-digit number. Here's the best way to understand it. It's like a big, big book of everything in the world. So look at this. 01 means we're dealing with live animals. If your product are ceramic products, your number is going to start with 69. If you're exporting toys, games, and sports, it's in chapter 96. And the more we know, and Kelly's really going to explain this more in detail, the numbers really tell us everything. They tell us we've got dairy cows under 90 kilograms. And one thing that you need to pay attention to here is this number also determines your tariff rate. So we have our first sentence, our first number, Schedule B. And so where are we going to find a Schedule B? Well, since I'm a typical entrepreneur, I want to do it the easiest, quickest way. I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type in Schedule B search engine. There it is. I've been doing this for over 10 years. It's always the first one to pop up. Once you click there, we're going to use two of Ernie Earl and Betty Sue's products. One is the license plate metal. The other is the Texas tongue torch sauce, jalapeno, habanero, cayenne. Here's what comes up. Describe your product. It's a license plate. What's it made of? It's made of base metal. What's your Schedule B number? Okay, it's not as difficult as you might think. Now let's do it with the hot sauce. Our product, I type in hot sauce. We knew it wasn't tomato because we paid attention to the ingredients, so it's other. We get into other, we know it's not a mayonnaise or a salad dressing. So look, there is our 10-digit number for Betty Sue's Texas tongue torch sauce. Okay, so this is the most important number you will have. It classifies every product in the world. It's the starting point for determining everything. It's required on all documentation, and it's essential for market research, your 6-digit. We have an export riddle for points. Here's the thing. I noticed there are several of you that are service providers. Is there a Schedule B for services? And you can take a guess. Yes, no, maybe. Well, no, there is not a Schedule B. Now, that is good news and bad news. First, the good news is you don't have to worry about classification. But the bad news is if you use the Schedule B for research, how are you going to research? Well, trust me, Betty Sue has now become a celebrity chef with her rattlesnake olive oil. She's a gourmet consultant, so she faces the same problem. She's going to use the Schedule B for olive oil for some research, but she might need to go to the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce or the North American Olive Oil Association. She's working with the SBDC in Puerto Rico and will possibly go to trade shows. She is certainly going to call Jessica or Karen and set up a virtual matchmaking. And then she's going to find out what beverage foods to attend to be able to connect with people. So we are in market entry, step number 3. We approach 2 parts, the best way to enter your market and the pricing. What we're going to talk about today is the pricing, okay? First thing you're going to hear is landed cost. You don't ever have to worry about what this means again, because it's exactly what it says. What does it cost for Betty Sue to land the product in Australia? So her base product for the Texas tongue torch sauce is $10 at her warehouse in Cactus, Texas. But she and Fiona Finn, there's got to be an end price. It's got to be shipped to the Port of Houston. And the Port of Houston is down there on the Gulf. There has to be transportation cost across the ocean. It has to come into the Port of Sydney. And oh my goodness, it has to clear customs and tariffs. Customs entry. So you're going to have tariffs and taxes. We have drayage, getting it from the ship to the dock. Maybe there's some storage. There's going to be some broker fees. There's also getting it to Fiona Finn's shop. So it may start out at $10, but the landed cost is $14 a bottle. Why is this important? Because Fiona Finn has to be able to price her product. She has to be able at $14 to sell this product with a markup. And I think at $14, she's still in good shape. But the important part is the landed cost on exporting helps your client determine their end cost. If you are importing, it's probably even more important because you don't want to get a product that instead of $14 costs you $314 a bottle. And remember, we talked about the Incoterms. There's going to be some pricing here. You need some pricing help to figure out your Incoterms. And of course, your BFF, your best friend forever, can help you with that. We don't cover here anything with legal, but I just want you to know that you need to pay attention to your intellectual property. And since there's different legal systems in the world, read your contracts and put in a divorce clause, okay? Now, remember this slide, who can export? Because we're in compliance. We're going to learn an important number here. If you have a product that is a military product, you're going to have to look somewhere else. But most of you all have something like the rattlesnake olive oil, and 95% of products do not require an export license, okay? And so the second number, and I'll put it up in a second, for the 95%, this is your export control classification number, is going to be EAR 99. So don't fret about this, because the vast majority of the time that is. And remember, it's all about, what is my product? Does it have regular use or does it have dual use? Where is it going? Cannot go to an embargoed country. Who is it going to? Doesn't matter if it's as simple as paper clips. It cannot go to the bad guy. And how will it be used? So we now have two numbers, one sentence. We're moving right along, but I want you to go back to our original important sentence. Export here equals import there. What does it take to get your product into the other country? The rattlesnake olive oil, the governing body in the US, is the USDA. But if you go to Japan, it's MAFF. Or if you go to Germany, that corresponding agency for food is going to be the Bundesministerium for Landwirtschaft. There. Okay, we are on transportation. Here's the best thing you need to know. Your best friend forever is your freight forwarder. They know everything, okay? There are four kinds of transportation in international. There is ocean, there is air, there is rail, and there is truck. And I can see Kelly and Maria laughing here, Maria Luisa. Who can help you? Sometimes things go wrong, but who can help you with all your logistics? It's your BFF forever. There are rules and regulations that you cannot possibly know, but who knows these rules and regulations? Your BFF, your freight forwarder. Here's our last sentence, okay? You'll see it in step number 6, transportation, and then step number 7, payments and finance. So this is really important. The goods equal the docs equal the money. Basically, the documents are the title to your goods, and you need correct documents to get paid, whether they're virtual paper, they're all going virtual, but the docs are the title to your goods, and so you need them to get paid. Well, look at all this. There's quite a lot of documents. And of course, Kelly will explain all of these because she's the pro here. But I want you to look at these aren't just problem documents. This is what's going to get you paid right here. Okay. And who is going to help you with that? Your BFF, your best friend forever. So we have Schedule B, we have the goods equal the docs equal the money, we have export here equals import there, and your ECCN number. Okay, we're into the Incoterms. Remember the infamous Incoterms? They determine the task, the cost, and the risk of getting the product from the seller to the buyer. There's 11 of them, but they look kind of like this. And they're infamous because you need to think before you ship. Again, you don't have to know the details because your BFF knows the details. So I think, this is my opinion, the easiest way to understand this is to group them into 4 terms. There are E, departure terms. There are F, main carriage, unpaid. There are C, main carriage paid. And there are D, arrival terms, okay? So you're going to agree with your client if Betty Sue and Fiona Finn determine an E term, X works, Betty Sue's responsibility is to package the goods and prepare the export documents. Fiona Finn will take care of the rest of the arrangements beyond Betty Sue's warehouse. If they agree on an F term, they agree for Betty Sue to get it to the port of export. So she packages up the goods at her warehouse, has the export docs, pays for transportation to get it to the port of Houston. Now, each one of those little F Incoterms is going to tell you some details about where in the Port of Houston, but that's not important right now, okay? Because your freight forwarder can help you. If they decide on a C term, Betty Sue is taking on more responsibility. She packages the goods, prepares the export docs, gets it to the Port of Houston, has it loaded on the ship, gets it over to the Port of Import, okay? Now there's one more step. If they decide on D terms, after she's gotten it to the Port of Import, she clears customs. Betty Sue would be responsible for that and has it delivered to Fiona Finn's front door. So you can see the relationship of this with the landed cost. One question, in which step of the 8-step process do we first meet our BFF? And I'm hoping everyone said step 3, market entry, to help you with your landed cost. The last one here, step 7, is about show me the money. So when it comes to payment terms, if the goods equal the docs equal the money, this should be easier to understand. Of course, the least risk is cash in advance. The highest risk is open account. You'll hear documentary collections. Well, now it makes sense. When the documents are presented and they're cleared in customs, you are okayed to get your money. It can either be on-site, time draft, different things like that. So documentary collections are the presentation and the clearing of correct docs. The goods are received and it's an okay to get your money. If you have a larger order or you're maybe exporting to a riskier country, you might want to consider a letter of credit. It basically substitutes the bank's credit for your client's credit. I have a little YouTube video. It's kind of cheeky and old and fun, but it does explain international letters of credit from Betty Sue's point of view, okay? Now, remember when we talked about direct and indirect, if you do indirect through a selling platform, you're going to be looking at different payment situations, okay? And to me, the most important one, you're obviously going to look at what they can offer you, multiple currencies. You want to do some research on the different country method of payment. But if it were me, the most important thing, there is an issue with chargebacks. So you want to choose one that has a secure fraud protection strategy. And last week, I just couldn't help but share this. These are the different SBA and loan possibilities. For those of you that are service providers, export credit insurance is like Excedrin PM. Please check that out. On the state level, there's a STEP program. Some states have it. For those of you that are dealing in food, the USDA, we got lots of acronyms. The Foreign Agricultural Service has a MAPS program that helps with translation of labels, okay? So look at what we've learned. We've learned about product classification, tariffs, landed costs. You found your 2 numbers, the Schedule B and the ECCN. We now understand the big picture of Incoterms and payment terms. So this is what's so cool. I got on the UPS site, and if you saw this before you listened to this, you would think, oh, I can't do that. But look at this. Look, find your harmonized codes. They're going to find your Schedule B number for you. Isn't that amazing? This is even more amazing. You click on landed cost, they're going to figure out your landed cost. And look at this, export license. They're going to tell you whether or not you need one. And of course, the best of all, the SDN, screen for denied parties. They're going to tell you if your client is one of the bad guys or the good guys. So I can't leave without hitting cultural because it's the most important step of all. It affects every step of the 8-step process, from your initial meet and greet to the way you do your emails to your logo. And I don't know if anybody remembers this logo. It was the original logo from the London Olympics. Obviously, someone was not paying attention. It's finger looking good. Your slogan did not translate well. In China, it translated as eat your fingers off. Your packaging, whoa, that's a little different. Okay, and your negotiations. So it's really not as difficult as you might think. You just follow the steps. So my encouragement for you, because you can tell I love this topic and I love entrepreneurs, is to look at the opportunity ahead. And if you decide yes, no, or maybe, I hope your decision lies in the yes department. I have kept this slide all these years, and this is why exporting is so important. It is the only thing that can recession-proof your business. This was from 2005 to 2009, in the height of the recession. Small businesses exporting had a 37% increase in revenues. Those not exporting had a 7% decline. That's a 44% difference. And of course, with e-commerce now, the world is your oyster. So remember, if Betty Sue can export, you can export. And why is that? Because in the words of Betty Sue, Export Queen, somebody, somewhere is always buying something. So congratulations, because I'm certain you all can solve the riddle of the exporter.
Oh, my dear Liz, I loved your presentation. That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing information. I know there's some questions in the Q&A that you can go ahead and check. We will do more questions later on. But at least thank you. And to all of you, I love it. If Betty Sue can export, we all can export. And
she's visiting the Queen's Platinum Jubilee right now.
And I think what I love on the next presentation that is going to complement what you presented us, and making fun exporting, right? And making fun about trade. Thank you, Elise. And thank you for being a fellow trade nerd on this. I want to welcome Kelly now while we to continue the conversation, and we're gonna do Q&A later on with Elise and Kelly. But Kelly, very exciting, right? Let me while we share the screen and start with your presentation. Very interesting presentation, and I think Kelly, from our perspective, and by the way, we didn't tell Elise to go to the UPS Tradeability. Thank you, Elise, for doing that. This training is for you to use the information. It's interesting all that information is important for our customers, right? When we deal with customers, have that information to help them be successful. So I'm going to turn it over to you to start the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Maria Luisa. And first, Elise, thank you for putting up the logo for the London 2012 Olympics. I spent 2 years of my life working on those Olympics, and I had to live with that logo for 2 years. So thank you for highlighting that one. And also, I just want to call out, you delivered in 30 minutes what could easily be contained in a 6 weeks course at any college level. So great job in condensing it into a nice 35 minute presentation. I'm going to take some of what you talked about and build on it and go into a little bit more deeper detail. My purpose really is to make sure that you understand what the cost will be when you buy and sell internationally. I'd hate for you to sell your goods for a certain price and then realize that there's a ton of other customs charges, duties, and taxes that you weren't preparing for. So this is just to dive a little bit more deeply into some of those drivers of cost. First one, of course, being the harmonized tariff number. So they call it harmonized because the first 6 digits are harmonized across all countries. So if you know what your Schedule B number is, you can be assured that the first 6 digits will match up to your destination country's import tariff number. And it's the destination country's tariff number that drives the duty. So we just spend some time on this slide breaking down what the different components are. But the important thing is to know those first 6 digits are going to be harmonized across all countries. Okay, so let's jump to my next slide, Maria Luisa, please. So I gave an example here from the US system. So this is if it were being imported into the US. I just want to call out how it's laid out in the US, which is very similar for all countries. So we have different indentations on the page. So, we start here with dates, figs, pineapples, and so on. So that's the more broad category. That's the 0804 is your heading, but then you go into subheadings. And so we don't have it shown on the page, but below dates, there'd be another line for your figs and pineapples, separate lines for each one. And then it gets into even much more detail in this particular case, as far as what the weight of the packaging even is, how big of a package is it? And so that's the part when you get to the very lowest number in the US, it's 10 digits. that drives what the duty rate would be. And so I wanted to show here that we have the general duty rate. In this case, it's 13.2 cents per kilogram. But we also have a column here for if it's got a free trade agreement. And you'll see all those different codes represent different free trade agreements. And those are free, obviously. But then we also have Schedule 2. So there are certain countries that the US trades with that we don't give those preferential duty rates to. Right now, countries such as Cuba, Russia, Belarus, they get the higher rates of duty. So I wanted to call this out because on the next page, I'm going to show you what Canada's tariff looks like for the same category. They don't break it out by the size of the package. They just have dates, and they are, you'll see in the MFN tariff, that column says free. So if you're exporting your dates to Canada, it would be duty free. So again, I just wanted to call out very clearly that the first 6 digits of your tariff are harmonized across all countries, but then as you get more specific within the destination country, that's what's going to drive the rate of duty. In my example, the US rate of duty was so many cents per kilogram. Most frequently, the rate of duty is based on a percentage of the value. That's where Incoterms come back into play. I don't have a slide on Incoterms because Elise had a very good slide about it. But the Incoterms, if you are responsible for a DDP, delivered duty paid Incoterm, that means you're responsible for paying the duties in that destination country. So you'd have to understand what the duty into that country is before you set your sales price. Some countries allow you to deduct from the value the international freight and international charges. So if it's a CIF term where you're paying for the international freight and you've included that factor into the price that you're charging your customer, before they calculate the duties and taxes, you can deduct that freight from the value and therefore drive a lower amount of duty being paid. But that varies by country, so don't quote me on that as being true for every country, but that's why it's important to understand those Incoterms along with the harmonized tariff schedule to drive the duty. So let's go on to my next, which we're going to jump into some documents. I know that Elise spent a little bit of time talking about documents. We just want to give you some examples of what they may look like. Very small print, so I don't expect you to be able to read them in good detail, but the ones that are most important will be commercial invoice, which you as the shipper prepares, bill of lading, which is prepared by your carrier, and then certificate of origin. Not all countries require it. Certain free trade agreements, if you wish to participate, do require it. That again would be your responsibility to complete that if one is required. My next screen is going to talk a little bit about what is the contents of a commercial invoice. And this is the most important thing. We've cited the regulation for commercial invoice that's for imports into the US, but most of this information is required in almost every country. So although, again, we've cited a US regulation, you can use this as a good guideline for what would be required in other countries. Most important thing, the second on the left, time, place, and companies or persons involved in the sale. So who is the seller? Who is the buyer? Is it being shipped directly to a third party? So you need to document all of the parties involved. Detailed description of the merchandise. That's what's going to drive that HS harmonized system, the tariff number. So it's very important to have a very good detailed description. An example of a poor description might be an apple. Were you talking about a Red Delicious apple, or are you talking about an Apple iPhone or an Apple iPad? So make sure you're very good, very detailed description. Other thing important would be, we say here must be in English. Well, that's for imports into the US, it must be in English. Make sure you understand the requirements for the country you're shipping to. If they have specific rules about, must it be in their native language or can it be in English? Okay. Let's jump to my next slide, which gives more detail about these various documents. Again, commercial invoice. That truly is your bill of sale. This is what you would present to your buyer and expect them to pay. But that's exactly what the customs authorities want to see. They need to see the true transaction, the true documented transaction in order to determine the proper amounts of duties. Then of course we have the bill of lading. We spoke about that as being prepared by the carrier, and then certificate of origin. In many countries, a certificate of origin is required, but even if it's not a mandatory document, if there is a free trade agreement that you are participating with, so for example, between US and Canada or US and Mexico, if you want to claim USMCA, the US Mexico Canada Free Trade Agreement, you do have to have a certificate of origin that declares that you qualify. Other free trade agreements require a certificate of origin. So make sure you understand if there is a free trade agreement involved, and if so, what are the documentary requirements to support that, okay? So I included certificate of origin and trade agreements together. They sort of go hand in hand. Okay, let's jump on. So this is free trade. My header here didn't really show up. It's in a different font here, but we're talking about free trade agreement. So what is a free trade agreement? And that really is, it's a treaty between countries, and you establish a free trade area. So in the case I just mentioned, USMCA, that free trade area is the US, Mexico, and Canada. And so each of the free trade agreements will very clearly indicate what is the free trade area that's involved. How many are there? Well, there are more than 400 country pairs that have free trade agreements. But the ones that are currently in force, about 290. And we got some stats here. They're a little bit older stats, back to 2015, but about 47% of US exports are exported under a free trade agreement. So some pretty significant numbers there. And there's other related terms, a free trade area, we just talked about that, a trading bloc. In some cases, you may have this agreement with a group of countries. Like the entire EU, for example, or several Asian countries may be engaged in this trading bloc. Okay, let's jump on to my next slide, which gives you some of the benefits, or what are in free trade agreements generally. Well, it does, generally speaking, eliminate or reduce the tariffs and how much money you have to pay for your duties. It may give you an import quota for specific goods. So where you're allowed to import a certain quantity of goods without paying duty. After that quantity threshold has been met, then maybe duty becomes applicable again. There are generally investment rules and for goods and services. So that's where that certificate of origin comes into play, because you may have to have a certain percentage of the content has to be from one of those countries. And generally it does through the red tape. So it does help to overcome certain technical barriers, makes things a whole lot easier in most cases to import. But of course, with every benefit, there are some rules. So we have to make sure that you comply with the terms of the free trade agreement in regards to investor protection, competition, sustainable development, in regards to the environment, and so on. So yes, free trade agreements are very beneficial, but you need to ensure that you comply with them. And here we just called out a couple of the agreements that the US has in play. We currently have agreements with 20 countries. There is this hyperlink here. I'm not sure if we'll be able to access it, but we do have that hyperlink that takes us to the list of those agreements. And we just want to call out specifically multilateral. So if it's between more than 2 countries, so again, the USMCA, it's between 3 countries, so it's considered multilateral. But then there's also bilateral. And we've listed the countries that we currently have bilateral free trade agreements with. Okay, okay, here's another quick look at tradability. So again, thanks to Elise for showing it to us earlier, but yeah, I just want to call out a few extra things. You can put in your country pairs, your origin and your destination. There's this place on here where you can help to build your tariff number, your HS number, but also you can ask for specific information. Like, what are there specific requirements for, in this example, we're looking at like cell phones, clothing. So we've called out, specific requirements in that country of destination for certain goods. So it just gives you a snapshot view of what might be required. For example, it's not on the screen here, but there may be information of if a good is regulated or needs a permit. Like, for example, if you have goods that are embellished with birds' feathers or shells or mother of pearl. Those are all regulated by the Fish and Wildlife Service in the U.S. and it's got equivalent agencies around the world. Certain food products, meat products. So we got the U.S. FDA here in the U.S., but each country has its own version of the FDA. The USDA, Department of Agriculture, if it's meat or animal products. Again, each country has their same types of agencies that have certain requirements and certain licensing obligations. And so this UPS tool here, Tradeability, will give you some high-level overviews as to what may be required. So it's a great tool to use. And I think in summary, there we go. So again, it's very important for you to protect your own business and make sure you're not caught by surprise by unexpected expenses or unexpected requirements. Know your product, know who you're selling to, understand what your landed cost will be. That's not on here, but the landed cost will help to determine how much duty impact there will be, understanding your Incoterms, so you know which portion of that cost you're responsible for. But understand where you're sending your product to, what are the requirements in that country, and therefore what forms would be required to export those goods. And there we go. That's the extent of my presentation.
Kelly, thank you so much. Love it. Love going into the deep. And I'm going to invite Elise to turn on her camera and join us as we're going to go into the Q&A. And we have some questions that have come up. And let me make certain that Elise joins us here in the screen. Yes. So the three of us, what a great presentation. Thank you to both of you, and very important information, right, and details. I'm going to answer first a question that everybody's asking. You will receive the slides and you will receive the recording. It's going to go in an email, the same email that tells you the link, and we're going to be able to have that. We have some questions that have come in, and I think for those questions that are very specific, right, about the pricing and how much do I put in this, or do I need to include in the invoice the warranty parts? That is one question. There's we can give you some guidance, not knowing all the details. And so keeping that in mind though, Kelly and Elise, let me do that question to both of you, right? The one question from an anonymous attendee is the warranty parts. What value should the commercial invoice contain? So Kelly, do you want to go first, or Elise?
Well, I'll let Kelly go first, but I kind of have a rule. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what's very interesting is that each country, the Customs Administration in each country has its own rules on valuation. So I'm going to speak right now specifically to U.S. imports. I know that's not what the question is about, as well as about exports. But for imports, if you're importing goods that were being sent to you to replace goods, so a warranty replacement, you need to declare the full value of the goods in the condition they're being imported. So if it's a brand new good being imported, you have to declare that full value. If you're returning damaged goods, that's where I think the question may be going. If you're exporting goods that you need to have replaced, then you can declare the value in the condition that they are right now. So it may be damaged goods. You may take a factor of depreciation. You may take a look at, what's it going to cost to repair them and subtract that from the price of new parts. So again, it's difficult to answer that question from a global perspective without knowing what the country pairs are.
What the country pairs. Elise, what is your formula?
My formula that I tell people, it's really important to tell the truth on customs forms. I mean, it's just kind of that simple. Everybody goes, but if I price it at 0, it's like, no, there's a really important rule, and that is tell the truth on custom forms. So
never declare 0. Never, ever, ever, ever declare 0. That's all
you can see my rules are much simpler. Tell the truth, be a Girl Scout, things like that.
Well, so, and when you declare 0, it raises a red flag. I used to work also with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and you are right, Elise, on target, because that causes a challenge and not putting zero racist red flags. So we have another question here that the audience has had, and I'm going to put together two questions that talk, how do you choose a good freight forwarder in a particular country of interest? And Stephanie, thank you for asking that, and thank you for working in MBDA. Great work that your agency does. That's a good question. And another question similar to that is, any tips finding a great freight forwarder and ensuring a solid partnership? So I think, let me, before I pass it over to both of you, I do want to say, in my experience now, over the 20 plus years, for small businesses, for any business, who you choose to work with can make or break your business. And you have to be very mindful of who you work with. A custom broker or a freight forwarder or transportation, they become a very important partner for you. And so you do have to do your homework. I'm not answering the question directly because, of course, I can say, well, choose UPS. We are in 220 countries. We can help you connect. But the purpose of today is more to give you the tools for you to make a smart decision on that part. And so, Elise, I'll turn it over to you first, and then to Kelly on the specifics on what advice you give, because you touched on this a little bit. And we'll have a model only talking about freight forwarders and customs brokers, how to choose them and what they look like. But Elise, what would be your advice?
Well, the riddle of the exporter has a workbook, and in step 6 transportation, it's like the very first page. So I usually speak to new exporters, and there's a series of things. And as an entrepreneur, you want to be able to start out, if you're starting out small, but you want to have somebody that can grow with you. You see what I'm saying? First of all, you have to have a freight forwarder is going to be your teacher. So you have to have somebody that will work with newbies, but someone you can expand with. You have to have someone that, if they're just a freight forwarder, has customs capabilities on the other side of the ocean. Those need to be addressed. You know, you would look at how big their offices are compared to, maybe you want someone that's a little bit smaller, a little bit more personal. But I think the biggest thing is, one, you want somebody that has enough reach that they can grow with you as you grow. And, you know, that's really the biggest thing as far as that goes. You know, can they handle your paperwork? Do they get back with you in time? The last thing is, certain products require very specific freight forwarders, hazmat products. When I was down at the International Trade Center, one of our speakers in Dallas, believe it or not, Dallas has an aquarium, and she was a freight forwarder customs broker, and she was in charge of getting these very rare seahorses to the Dallas Museum. So if you have a specialty item and your freight forwarder, you would want them with experience there and with that particular product, and obviously the more experience in that country.
And I love, Elise, that you just summarize our model that we're going to give in 2 weeks about freight forwarders and brokers, but very important. This is one of the most important decisions you're going to make with exporting. While Elise was answering Kelly, one question came in: does UPS handle both dried and perishable food products? Do UPS provide you as house customs brokers and freight forwarders when working with importer and exporter? The answer is
absolutely yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you use UPS as a freight forwarder, you obviously can use UPS as your customs broker. But if you already have a relationship with a customs broker in the destination country, or if your customer has a relationship with a customs broker in that country, we don't have to be your customs broker. You know, we can take on, you know, just one piece of the puzzle. We prefer to do both, you know, because it just makes it a more seamless process, and we are certainly capable of doing both. But just know you've got options.
Yeah, and the transportation piece, right? So, okay, we're running almost out of time. I promise the gods of time that this week will end in 1 hour. There are some questions in there. Indirect exporter, do we need a Schedule B product too? Not having more information, Maria, I think we or Kelly or Elise, would you be able to answer that? Just with that information?
No, I would need more info.
Right. But I think everybody in the supply chain has to be checked out. So I would imagine that whoever is buying it from you, if they have to check out their supply chain, that you're going to be part of that.
Yeah, and Maria, definitely connect us. We'll send you information so you can connect with either of the two speakers today, and you can get more information. With certificate of origin from UK to USA, they charge tariffs. This is correct, Kelly. Is this correct?
So repeat the question again.
So someone has a certificate of origin from the UK, I imagine exporting to the US. Do they charge tariffs? Maria, it depends of what is your product. Is this correct, my dear?
Yes. Yes. So there is no free trade agreement between the UK and the US. So there would be, even with a certificate of origin, there would still be tariffs charged. Yes.
Okay, and I apologize a lot. The other two questions came a little bit late, but we promised to respond to Sherry and Anonymous because we're going to get those questions. I want to say thank you to Elise and Kelly because you were awesome. And I think we learned a lot. We're going to follow up to all the participants. Kelly and Elise, I already told you this many times today, but may the force be with both of you.
Thank you.
You're awesome. The energy is high. And for anyone who's watching Obi-Wan Kenobi, awesome series in Disney Plus. I know I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But next week we're gonna have an amazing model, and next week, and I should probably bring it up in here. Our next model. So for people to be aware of. Oh, I'm going forward. That's not good. I'm going backwards in the presentation. But next week, same time on a Thursday, and I forgot, but we are going to be talking about e-commerce and e-commerce logistics. And so that is a very, very important topic. We're going to send you this link so you can get the information, the logistics for e-commerce. And we're going to have a great presentation with the U.S. Commercial Services and UPS talking about logistics, and our invited guest, Shopify, who's gonna tell us about what is Shopify for, and how does it work in a marketplace, or how does it fit into a web page. I'm gonna leave it at that so we can have that. Thank you to everybody for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.